Hey everybody, welcome to a Stamp Club meeting. We are getting together today to do kind of a fun technique with a new bundle in the new annual catalog. And as I go through the steps, you may hear some people chatting. We're just having a very informal group today. And also, I will tell you that you don't need to have the Seaside Wishes bundle to do something like this. I'm going to talk about some techniques that you really can use on other bundles that you may have. So when I stop jiggling my camera, we'll start here. I'm going to be posting this video on a blog hop that will happen tonight, and it's with the North Carolina demos. And what we're highlighting are the bundles that are on sale through today. And they are the die bundles in the new annual catalog. They have an additional 10% off. And the bundle that I am going to be using is called Seaside Wishes. And it's super cool. It has 3 components, and I will show you those in just a minute. And I'm going to do 2 designs. I'm not going to do these all the way through, but I'm going to highlight some of the differences and some of the techniques that I used. But first, let me show you the pieces of the bundle, because there are 3. It's not just a stamp set and die. It has another component that is very, very cool. So it does have a stamp set called Seaside Wishes with some really nice elements and some very nice sentiments. It does have a die set, and this is the die set that cuts out quite a few pieces. But you may notice that there is a very interesting die that is right here. It is a 3-component die. And the really fun part of this bundle is it comes with a hybrid embossing folder. And what that really means is, in addition to embossing the paper like a normal embossing folder does, that if you combine the embossing folder with this die, you can actually cut out a piece of paper at the same time that you run it through your embossing machine. So this is what the hybrid embossing folder is all about. And this is why this is a very, very special bundle. So I've done a lot of prep because I wanted to make sure that I could hit the highlights and show you what I did and how to use some of the products. I'm going to create a mask. And the way that I did this was I took a piece of crumb cake cardstock, and I put that into my embossing folder. I then put the die, and I put the die on the side. If I flip this over, I put the die on the side that has Stampin' Up! Logo. And I placed it so the blades are facing the paper. And what that's going to do is it's going to cut out images of the sand dollar. So if I put my paper down like that, I fold the embossing folder over, and you can see that the die is going right outside the outline of those 3 sand dollars. And if I run this through, what I will get when I have run that through, I'm just going to take that piece of paper out, is I will end up with a piece that looks like this. Imagine it without the white ink, because we're going to use the white ink in just a minute. And there will be 3 corresponding sand dollars that pop out. And what's really nice about these sand dollars, and I'm not going to get them exactly pieced back in, but they are not only cut, but they also have an embossed image on the top. It's very 3D, and it really, really looks like a sand dollar. But what I wanted to do for these cards is make a mask. So I took one piece like I just did, and I created a mask. and I set that to the side. I will have 3 extra sand dollars that I'll be able to use on another project, and I know that I will use them. So I'm just going to put them to the side. And then I took another piece of the crumb cake, and this time I used the embossing folder like an embossing folder. I did not add the die that I could use with the hybrid embossing folder. I just took my embossing folder, put my paper in like I normally would, ran that through the die cut embossing machine, and then at the end of that process, I have a piece of paper that is die cut. So you can see the difference. This one on the right, again, ignore that white ink, that had the die. This one did not. And what this has left me with is a beautiful piece that is embossed. So you can use that hybrid embossing folder as an embossing folder. You can add the die and you will get beautiful pieces that you can use on other projects, and you'll get a mask. So I'm going to show you a couple of the steps that I used to create this card. And you will notice on this card that it does open. It truly is a full card. And the image in the piece that I have on the front is a full 4¼ by 5½. This piece is a full 4¼ by 5½. So I took the mask that I created and I put that over the top of the piece that I ran through my embossing machine. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tack down the piece that I embossed onto a scrap piece of paper. And I am using one of my new favorite products. I got this really recently. It's Post-it tape. Comes in a dispenser. You can get this on Amazon. It is awesome. It can be reused many times, and the tack doesn't wear off quickly. And it's also very, very gentle when you're pulling it up and off of your piece. And you can see that what I'm going to do is use the piece that I cut out as a mask. And I'm just trying to make sure that the area that goes around each of the sand dollars on each side is about even. And then I'm going to take another piece of my Post-it note, and I'm just going to tack this down. Now I have already completed a piece, so I am not going to be doing this entirely, but I am going to show you how I go from this to this. This is kind of step 1. And it's very simple. I grabbed a blending brush. I'm using some craft white ink. This is thicker than normal ink. I did put it on a non-Stampin' Up! Ink pad that I just had around. And I am simply going to get some of that ink on my blending brush. I'll probably just start down here with the small one. And I'm going to add some ink. And what I find with the craft ink, since it is thicker, is you just have to get a little bit going on your blending brush to really get the ink to kind of work into the bristles, but then it will. And I'm just going to go around and add in that white color. And just like anything, when you do this, make sure that your blending brush is going in all different directions. That will help get the color into the crevices in a design like this. Now, if you don't have this particular hybrid embossing folder, maybe you have another. There have been several that Stampin' Up! Has sold over the last couple of years, and I know there are other companies that sell them as well. But if you don't have that, you can always run a piece of paper through an embossing folder, and you can either be very careful and go in and use an X-Acto knife and kind of cut out the image, or you can use a punch and try to get about the same size. And you don't even have to get exactly the same size to get a really, really cool effect. And I'm just going to go over this. I'm not going to do the other two sand dollars because I've already created the piece and allowed the ink to dry, because this ink is going to take just a couple of minutes to dry since it is a little bit thicker than our normal water-based ink. But obviously I would do the same thing on the other two. And then when I'm happy with the color, how much I put on, I can go ahead and take the mask off. What's nice about this is you can also peek as you're going, just to make sure that you're getting the ink that you want. And if you want more, just put it back down, align the edges where you've been adding that color, and you can add some more. But you get the idea. So when you are all happy with the way that your 3 sand dollars look, you can simply take off your Post-it note, or if you're using washi tape, whatever it is that you might be using. And then you will end up with a piece that looks something like this. And you're the judge. You're going to be the one who will decide how much white you want. You can make it brighter, you can make it duller, you can put white in the middle and some other colors around the edge. It's really up to you. Now, someone asked me, why are you going to all that trouble if you could take a piece of paper and run it through your hybrid embossing folder, and maybe you would use a white piece and you would cut out these in white. So pretend with me for a minute. Let's pretend that this is crumb cake and these are white. And then I could put these pieces back in and essentially have something that would look like this. That's absolutely true. But in my mind, that would use 2 pieces of paper, because I would need one color to cut out the 3 sand dollars and another color for the background. And I also like the fact that this is just all together, because it gives me the ability to do some fun things without fussing around and trying to get these sand dollars back in exactly where they came out. But could you cut out crumb cake and white sand dollars and put them back in? Sure, you could. You absolutely could. But this is just another technique to create something kind of similar. Now, when I look at what I ended up doing, the last thing that I did when this is dry, and you can get it, touch it and see if it's dry. If you're super impatient, you can also get a heat gun and you can heat it up and get it drier quicker. But I like to just let the craft ink dry on its own. It tends to keep the pigment when you allow it to dry on its own. But you might notice if you look at the right and the left, that on the left, there's a little bit of dark. I did that intentionally. While sand dollars are beautiful, they're not perfect. And I also think that if you add just a little bit of color, so I just put on some early espresso, I don't want it super dark. I just want to add a little bit of contrast. And what that's going to do is 2 things. It's going to give some depth to this piece. And you can even see that already. If you contrast this and this, you can see the design in the middle of that sand dollar a little bit better, because it does have a tiny bit. I'm really trying to just be very, very light-handed with this color and not put a lot on. And it also makes it look like it's a little more realistic, I believe, because it's been lying in the sand. All right. So we've kind of created our focal point. And for the other card, I did the exact same thing. I'm going to bring in that other card and show you the difference because I'm going to kind of create these at the same time and recreate them. The right one, that front piece is the entire front of the card, like I told you. So it's 4.5 by 5.25. That's the starting size of the crumb cake. When I showed that to my husband, he was kind of funny. He can be my best critic, but he said, "Hon, it looks like you dragged that out from under the couch. It looks like somebody sat on it." And I thought, well, that's sort of the intention because I wanted it to look really, really distressed. But I thought, all right, let me make another one. And I'm going to cut the crumb cake piece so you can see the white cardstock base. And that's a thick, basic white cardstock base. So it's 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4.25. They're the exact same thing, but I wanted to give this a little bit of a border. So this one is 4 by 5.25. That's the crumb cake piece. And then the distressing is different, but we'll get into that in just a minute. So the process to create the focal point for this one is exactly the same. I did the masking, I did the white ink, and now I'm just going to go back and add in a teeny bit of the early espresso and just give these a little bit more character. And it might be something that I can see better in person than on camera, but it definitely adds just a touch of realism. And you can put as much or as little color as you want. All right, so let's talk about a couple of the next steps. And there really are not many steps to make this card. So we're going to look at both of these. Both of the cards have some distressing. And the one that my husband thought got pulled out from under the couch definitely got distressed. And I'm going to show you how to do this kind of distressing if you've never done it. It is fun. It gives a really cool effect. And you can do as much or as little as you want. And I'm going to go ahead and do that on the larger piece. In order to do that, you probably want to grab a bone folder. And I'm going to work a corner. And what happens when you are working your paper is you're breaking up fibers. And you're going to have the ability to tear this paper into a couple of layers. And I'm just going to work up that edge. And don't worry if your paper looks like it's bent. It's really meant to be. And we're going to add a little bit more of the distressing as we go. And if you work it both front and back, curling it forward and backward, you're going to eventually see, and I'm already seeing it, that that paper is starting to split. And I can show you by using my fingernails. And just, you can see that that piece is starting to split. And that's the whole point of this kind of distressing. And my fingernails are not super long, but even getting in just a little bit of a fingernail between those layers and starting to pull them apart, you're going to see that you definitely can roll like I'm doing, where you're going to roll that piece. You can pull both sides up, and the more you work those sides, the more pliable the fibers are going to be. And essentially, I did this technique all around. I'm not going to do it right now because I think you're getting the idea. But if you continue to just use your fingernails, you are going to be able to pull those fibers apart. And you can do this as much as you want. And you'll see that these are two levels. The one on the right is a little bit more distressed. The one on the left isn't quite as distressed. So when you get done and you've gone all the way around, there's some very cool additional things that you can do to make it look even more purposeful. And that involves going back. I'm using the early espresso ink again. And I'm just going to bring in from the blending brush some of that ink. I could also, if I wanted to, I'm going to bring in my pad. I could literally just take the paper and kind of put that on the edge as well. And that gives a really cool effect where it almost looks like, I know there's a technique where you can use tea stains and you can go around and just make a piece of paper look really kind of antique-ish. And this is as much or as little as you want. So you get the idea. And then in this embossing folder, there are some areas that look like maybe larger grains of sand or perhaps pebbles that are on the beach. And what I did on the one on the left is I very, very lightly use my blending brush. And again, this has sort of residual early espresso ink. And if you do it lightly, the ink is going to go on the places where the design is lifted up. So you can see those a lot better now. And I just went around and I added a little bit of ink on those areas where the design was lifted. So that's the beginning of adding in this distressed look. And as you can see, I continued all the way around. And some edges are more distressed than others. It's absolutely up to you. And you can make one corner look more, a couple of corners look less, and do it down the sides and do whatever you would like. Now, another way to distress, which is not as forceful, as harsh to the paper, is if I come back to the smaller piece. So again, this is the one that's 4 by 5 1/4. What I decided to do on here is I'm just going to rough up the edge a little bit. And on the edge, I'm going to put some of the early espresso. I thought having that defined dark brown around the edge really helped the whole thing pop. And there are different ways to do this as well. This is a tool that I bought 1,000 years ago from Memory Maker, or Making Memories, excuse me. And it has a blade right at the top of that V, upside down V. You can use a fork, you can use a knife, you can use anything that has a little bit of a blade. And then let me get my ink out of the way. All I'm going to do is run the paper across that blade, and it is simply going to distress the edge. It's going to make the edge kind of stick up. It'll be a little bit thicker and it will look like it's a little bit worn. Almost like when you put something in a paper trimmer and the blades are kind of dull and they give you that sort of cut that doesn't look completely even. That's kind of what I'm going for. And you can do this as much or as little. You can come back and do multiple passes. And again, you will have something in your house, I guarantee it, that you'll be able to use to do that kind of distressing. And then I came back and I just took my blending brush, really trying to make sure that I'm just getting the edge, and I'm adding in a fairly concentrated. I'm not doing second generation ink on this because I want that line to be seen when I put it on the white cardstock. Another way to do this, very similar to what I did on the other card, is you can literally take the edge of that paper and pounce it on your stamp pad, and you're going to get a very dark edge, which is really nice. Just be careful when you are moving from side to side that you don't get ink all over your fingers and transfer the ink onto your card. because you probably wouldn't be too happy about that. So watch where you're holding. And when you do one edge and you move it to another side, just make sure that you're not touching any of the edges that you just inked up. And you'll notice when I put this on that orange background that you can see that dark brown. So that's another way to do the distressing. All right, so that's the focal point. That is going to end up being directly adhered to the cardstock. And I'm trying not to get my finger inky. I'm just going to put that over to the side. But let's take a look at these two cards again and sort of look at the similarities and the differences. So we've done the crumb cake piece. We've talked about the distressing. The next two pieces that we need to do, and they're quick, we need to talk about the starfish that are added on top and also the sentiment. So in the stamp set, you get two very fun starfish. And all I did for those is I got a couple of blocks out and I stamped them with Calypso Coral ink. I thought that would go incredibly well. It looks kind of beachy and fun. So I stamped those. And then in the die set, there are two starfish dies. So obviously you know where we're going. I cut out the starfish using the dies that are in the set. And I've got two of each size to put on two of these cards that I will be making. And these cut out very, very well. They are distinctive, so they're going to give you a nice little pattern that looks more realistic than if this were just a solid color. And in order to put those on, nothing complicated, I used some mini glue dots. If you don't have mini glue dots, I'm sorry, mini dimensionals, not glue dots. You can take your larger glue dots and cut them into smaller pieces. And then I just put one in the middle and one in the middle. And what's fun about these pieces is I intentionally did not adhere the arms. I only did the middle. And I wanted to make it look a little realistic and a little fun. So before I put those pieces onto the card, I simply took my bone folder and just curled and go down all the way around. And then if you want to curl a couple up or whatever you want to do, it really does make the starfish look a little more realistic because it's not going to lie flat. And then you can just put one dimensional in the middle and put that right onto your card. And I wanted to kind of play off having a larger and a smaller. So I put those on. The other thing is the sentiment. And you may notice that the sentiment on the right does look like it probably got pulled out from underneath a couch. It is very distressed. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to match the distressing in the background. And these pieces are, I'll bring out the two that are going to go on the replication of these two cards. These are done on Pool Party. And the Pool Party pieces for this are 3 3/4 long and 5/8 high. I wanted it to be 3 3/4 long so that you'd be able to see a little bit of the crumb cake on either side. And then I just kind of measured how big the sentiment was in the stamp set and thought that 5/8 of an inch in height would work great. I cut out my pieces of Pool Party, and then again, I used Calypso Coral, and I stamped the image or the sentiment on. And I know you've heard me say this, but I love the sentiments that have the block lettering and the script lettering together. I think they're really, really cool. To make the sentiment on this card look distressed, you know what I did. I took the bone folder and I just started messing around with my sentiment. And I really, really did not take any kind of gentleness in bending and using that bone folder to break up the fibers. I kind of went a little nuts, and that's okay. And you'll see that even at this point, there are quite a few places where it's starting to look distressed. And just like I did on this piece, I went in with my fingernail and I started breaking up those corners because I wanted the distressing to match the distressing in the background. I didn't go quite as far because the sentiment is kind of close to the edge, but I definitely went in and pulled those fibers apart and rolled them back a little bit, went down the sides as well, and rolled that back just to give it this really kind of uncool feeling. And then I brought in my blending brush and added in, and you can see that I added in some of that early espresso. So I distressed this piece as much as I distressed the edges. And then this piece was added with a couple of dimensionals, one on either side, one in the middle, and then I cut one in half and split the difference. And I purposely didn't try to lie it flat. I allowed it to do its funky little however it wanted to be on the card. So you've got very distressed and very distressed. On the other card, the one that allows you to see the edge of the card base, again, I mimicked the way that the distressing was done on that card. So I got out my distressor and just ran that through. You will, like I've already said, find something in your house that you can use. You can use a knife. If you have one of these, you definitely can. And just trying to distress it a little bit, just so that you can visually see that that paper has been kind of bent at the end and made to look a little bit bigger. And then just like I did on the edge of this piece, I went back and I just made sure that I had early espresso ink all the way around. And that could be by either putting it on with a blending brush or opening up my stamp pad and adding ink on each side, whichever way you want to do that. So the result of that was that the distressing on the sentiment matches the distressing on the focal point. And just like on the other one, this piece was added with a couple of dimensionals. And then the final addition on either of these, I'll flip this over so that you're not staring at purely espresso ink, was the addition of some of the really, really beautiful. These are the adhesive backed speckle dots. They are part of the Latte Love Suite. And you'll see that I've used quite a few on different projects, but they have some beautiful colors that work really well. At least I thought they worked really well. I used the kind of the brown, the dark brown and the light brown at the top. And I just put some of these around to give it just a little bit more depth and a little bit more interest. My husband and I just got back from a trip to the beach. We went to Holden Beach in North Carolina and visited with quite a few members of my family. So it's kind of appropriate that I am sharing this kind of card today. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you try it. And like I said, you do not need this hybrid embossing folder or the bundle to do this kind of technique. Find something that gives you a really nice 3D design when you're putting it through an embossing folder, you can very easily add some craft ink to that area just to give it a different definition, and then go back in with a darker color so that you can see the detail. And the distressing techniques are fun. Distressing isn't something that everybody likes, but I invite you to try it if you haven't. It might be something that you will really, really enjoy, and you may be surprised at how pretty the cards are when you use distressing. So hope you enjoyed it. I would love to see what you made, and happy stamping. And until next time, when we do the next project, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.